Welcome back, guys. Today's episode, I am sharing 8 true Airbnb horror stories. You won't believe what happened inside my rental. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Now, let's begin. I booked the place because it looked clean and boring. That was the point. Work had me in Chicago for a week, and the idea of a hotel lobby and elevators and keyed minibars made my shoulders creep up. I wanted a door that didn't involve a front desk. The listing said garden unit, self-check-in, keypad on the door, cozy with character, which usually translates to low ceilings and a dehumidifier humming somewhere out of sight. I've learned to find those comforting. It means the place doesn't pretend to be more than it is. The instructions hit my inbox an hour before arrival. Bright, chirpy, emoji sprinkled. Hi, code is 2174. Gate 3 steps down. Black door to your right. You may need to tug the door toward you while turning the deadbolt. She's a little stubborn in the cold. The exterior camera is temporarily offline, but we've had no issues. Welcome. I read it twice standing under a street lamp, breath pluming into the kind of early spring wind that still bites. The sidewalk was a rivulet of melt and grit, a bus breathing at the corner, the city holding its breath between seasons. I juggled a suitcase down the narrow concrete chute toward the coal-black door set into brick, the kind of entrance you'd miss if you weren't looking for the alley's mouth. The keypad was the rubber button kind with the numbers worn just a shade lighter on the common digits, 10 tiny black ovals all the same until you pressed them and felt the give. 2174, beep, 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 beep. A cheerful chirp, and an indignant metal grunt as the deadbolt retracted and stuck for a second, like it was thinking about whether I deserved to be let in. I did the tug and turn like the host had said, and the door swung, dragging air that smelled like damp concrete, lemon cleaner, and heat pipes about to cough. Inside was exactly the kind of tidy Adobe stock photo life I'd rented. A low couch with a throw folded precisely, a stripped-down kitchen with a toaster balanced on a cutting board, an IKEA lamp throwing light at a 45-degree angle. I locked the door behind me, feeling the deadbolt roll with a weight you can't juggle away. Old metal inside new casing. The windows were at ankle height, narrow rectangles looking up at sidewalk grate and brick. Treatments from the 90s, hiding the view of people's shoes and dog leashes passing by. You hear everything in a garden unit. Footsteps become a language. A bus is a wave. The upstairs neighbor's laughter is a punctuation mark you feel in your teeth. I've stayed in enough to know the soundtrack. I made tea with the kettle provided, watched it argue with the electric coil before choosing to boil. The microwave on the counter blinked the wrong time. 3:17 in icy blue segments, blinking, waiting for someone to tell it the truth. I told myself it was leftover from the last outage. I didn't set it. I rarely do. It felt like making a promise to the room. There was a laminated house manual on the coffee table, house rules, Wi-Fi password, trash day, a note about the basement, no guest access to the back stair, locked, sealed, a line about a vintage door that sticks in extreme weather, and, highlighted in a bubble of yellow, quiet hours 10 p.m., 8 a.m. I laughed to myself. It's never really quiet down there. It's just quieter. I'm not superstitious. I've lived alone long enough to know how the night sounds and what a building does with its bones. Still, I did what I always do in a new place. I put my bag in the bedroom, checked each window latch with a fingertip press, wedged my suitcase in front of the closet that didn't quite close, mostly to feel like I'd done something. The bed was pushed against the wall, a low varnished frame. The sheets smelled like detergent with a whisper of someone else's dryer. The radiator pinged once, twice, like a polite throat clear, and then subsided. I poured the tea into a chipped mug with a faded cherry blossom, the flake eye color kind hotels don't buy because it doesn't read sanitized in photos. When I locked the door again after grabbing a second bag from the car, the bolt did the same thing, a little shiver before it settled. I put it in the mental category with squeaky cabinets and had my tea on the couch while the upstairs TV mumbled something through 2 floors of wood and plaster. The room exhaled around me. The microwave kept blinking 3:17 as if the number were patiently waiting its turn in a conversation I hadn't started yet. I thought as I closed the bedroom door that first night that I liked the hum. It felt like shelter. It felt in its ordinary way, like proof that I wasn't alone in an unfriendly way. That I was not the only thing awake in the building when the city slipped into its winter raw sleep. It was an enzyme-washed kind of sleep. I went under and my mind kept bobbing back to the surface. I had the thin blanket dream, the one where you know you're asleep because you can hear every sonic layer of the place you've rented. Someone clinking dishes 2 floors up, a car idling, then an old laugh on speakerphone under the bathroom vent that might be an actual person or the building's ghosts rearranging themselves into something like spee. I turned my phone face down on the nightstand just to stop myself from checking. The blue light wouldn't help. I woke up because I knew I wasn't alone. Not in the movie way where you sit bolt upright, hair perfect, lightning flash. It was smaller, closer to the skin. I woke because my body had already done a calculation my conscious brain lagged behind. The noise outside the door wasn't the neighbor's door, and it wasn't the building settling. At first it was just the pattern. 4 measured beeps, not loud, the kind that could be a microwave if you don't know the cadence of an electronic lock. Pause. 4 more. A longer tone, flattened like fatigue. It was precisely the same chirp I'd made earlier with my own code, except this time I was lying in bed watching the ceiling texture resolve itself into continents and trying to pretend we weren't sharing a pathway with someone else's hands. My eyes found the strip of light at the bedroom door, because everything you need to know lives there at 3 a.m. It was a hard, imperfect rectangle, and on the other side of it, something bumped. Not the soft bump of something dropped, not a shoulder-wide thud. It was the stutter of a metal piece deciding whether, in its soul, it was a fixed part of a door or a moving part of a lock. Beep, 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 beep. A hitch. Then the long, complaining tone. A pause that let the dehumidifier's small engine enforce its own hum. Then a noise I didn't know a lock could make. The sound of the bolt retracting half a thought and clacking back like a breath caught on a word. I didn't move. I tucked the covers against my sternum like I might trap the breath inside me before the room could smell it. In that way, the stupid body betrays you. My tongue felt like I'd licked a battery. You don't realize your heart has hands until it squeezes your throat from the inside, and even that thought, too dramatic, embarrassed me as I lay still. My brain has always tried to talk me down faster than my body can follow. I counted my breaths by grip on the sheet. There's no peephole on that door. Garden units rarely bother because the only thing you can see at that angle is your own caution looking back. The only accessible window was set just high enough to show me a slice of sidewalk and starless sky and nothing in between. All the other windows were glass block, light, privacy, and zero information. The door was 10 feet away, separated from my bed by a hallway that looked much longer in the yellow light coming from under the bathroom door I'd left cracked open, more out of habit than strategy. The sounds came again, a pattern as polite as a knock, which is a terrifying way to describe someone attempting your code. The beeps were not frantic, the rhythm was almost patient. In between them, I realized I could hear the subtle scrape of someone's cuff against the metal face of the keypad, the faint air of skin against textured plastic buttons. I remember thinking, absurdly, whoever it was had probably done this a lot, had the shape of it in their hands. My phone, face down, glowed through the case with a notification pulse, the soft lighthouse flash of something timed rather than someone calling me. I flipped it over because it was something to do with my hands, grateful for the distraction, even if it turned out to be an ad or my brother sending a meme from 2 time zones away. The screen read 3:17 a.m. It was that clean, 3:17, and above the time, an email. Preview from Yale Access, the brand of the lock. Subject line, new activity on your door. I stared at the phrase until it blurred. I didn't have an account. I hadn't set one up. I'd given the door my fingers and a chirp, and here it was telling me it knew me intimately enough to ping. I can't explain why I didn't call the host first. My thumb hovered over the Dana Airbnb message bubble. In my head, even in real fear, there's a line I don't cross without proof. It's easier to convince yourself you're overreacting at 3:17 than to risk speaking into the dark and getting only your own breath back. I texted, "Hi, sorry for the hour. I'm hearing the lock beep like someone's entering a code. Can you check the exterior camera?" I typed PLS and deleted it. I added, "Not urgent if I'm misunderstanding." That stupidity of the word misunderstanding, as if the lock and I were just not seeing eye to eye. The beep stopped. There was that tiny, almost nothing noise you only hear when you're listening for it. The complaint of a deadbolt being touched from the wrong side. Then footsteps, the kind you feel more than hear when they're above you, crossed somewhere overhead, a drag, a step, a door closing very softly. The dehumidifier clicked off. The room took in a breath and didn't give it back. I lay there for a long time, the alert sitting on my screen like a dare I wasn't ready to open. Less because I didn't want to know, and more because knowing at 3:17 would mean I would not sleep again in that century. When I slept eventually, it was the thin sleep that feels like you're practicing for being awake. Morning stripped the tricks off the room and gave me everything in daylight logic, as if light itself were an argument I'd lost. The microwave still blinked 3:17 with the idiot certainty of digital clocks. I finally punched at the buttons and set it to the real-time more to BR. Eke the loop, then because I cared if my noodles were accurate later. The email from Yale Access sat at the top of my inbox like a silver fish. I opened it with the kind of cautiousness you reserve for messages from exes. One eye closed metaphorically, thumb hovering over back. It was a summary. Door jam detected at 3:17:12. Invalid pin entered at 3:17:09. Mechanical bolt error at 3:17:16. It was annotated with language that was too cheerful for the time of day. Don't worry, your door is secure. The part that made the coffee go prickly in my mouth was the line above those. Unlocked via keypad. User, guest at 3:17:06, followed by relocked, auto at 3:17:30. No open/close event recorded. My first thought, because this is how my brain stays on the rails, was that the lock's door sensor wasn't enabled. I checked the manual. It wasn't. They hadn't installed the magnet that tells the lock that the door is actually open. So yes, sure, it could report unlocked and then relocked without the door moving. That's a thing. I told myself that out loud. I told the room, which is one way of telling yourself. Dana replied to my middle-of-the-night message around 9. Hey, OMG, I'm so sorry just seeing this. The exterior cam is offline right now, waiting on a new power brick. Ugh, but our building is super safe. The lock can be a little finicky and cold snaps and will register attempts if it gets jostled. Did you get any alerts? We can swap your code if that helps. She added a sun emoji. I stared at it and typed, "It's okay, might have been noise from the street," and then deleted street because garden units don't have a street in the literal sense. "Could you change my code anyway?" I wrote, just in case. She did immediately, a new 4-digit arrangement that, when I looked at the keypad buttons, lined up with the ones least worn. I told myself that was a good sign. At lunchtime, with the kind of bravado daylight gives you, I stood in the entryway and entered the old code just to change the sound in my head, from last night's patient tries to my own petty control. Wrong code. Wrong code. I pressed the wrong ones on purpose to hear the error tone and cement it. I tried the new code. The lock gave its efficient mechanized hum. The deadbolt slid back. The door stayed closed. I set a chair under the knob when I wasn't using it, knowing full well that a chair under a knob is theater against a deadbolt. You do things that are performative and feel relief anyway. But something had shifted in the way the room held me. That evening, returning from a grocery run, the lock started humming before I touched it. It was tiny, barely a second of life, like it was stretching. I stopped with my keys still in my pocket and watched the little backlit numbers glow. I told myself the vibration from my steps on the concrete had jostled it. I told myself the wind can rattle a lock like teeth. I pressed the new code and it accepted me immediately, almost before I finished the last number. It felt like someone who'd already guessed what I was going to say and nodded ahead of time. I laughed out loud at the stupid thought. Out loud is how I break the spell. That night I did everything differently because I didn't want some shape in my head to think it knew me. I left the bathroom light off. I set my phone not to do its lighthouse flash. I put a heavy skillet, handle pointing out, on the kitchen counter like I might leap from bed and wield it. In reality, I'd have thrown it at my own foot if anything. I got in bed sideways on the mattress and made a point of reading. I wanted to be the kind of person who forgot about a noise when there wasn't one. At 3:16 a.m., the dehumidifier clicked off. A small thing, the place exhaled in a different tone. The microwave, which I'd set, now told me a number I didn't need. I know because I looked at my phone out of habit anyway. The blue numbers were almost kind about it, as if telling me ahead of time so I wouldn't be surprised. I wondered, suddenly and without context, whether anyone else had mentioned it in the guest book if there had been one. There wasn't. This place was too digital for a spiral-bound paper with dates and hearts. At 3:17, the notification rolled in again. Not the beeps first, not this time. The phone. Activity on your door. I had not installed the app. The emails just appeared because somewhere my email had been entered as the guest contact, and part of my brain wanted to forward them to Dana and say, hey, maybe don't set it that way. I lay there and watched my door the way you watch the ocean when you're sure it's about to pull something you can't name, a tide you can feel in the mattress. I didn't get up to test it. I didn't want to put my face near the seam of anything at that hour. You want something to resolve. It's what stories do for us. The pattern did not oblige. There were beeps. There was the half-swallowed clack of metal thinking about becoming liquid. There was the silence I was supposed to take as comfort. I didn't call anyone. The truth is, even the cops, even a neighbor, even the host, if they'd come at that exact minute, would have found a door being a door and a tenant who didn't know how to explain why the numbers 317 had started feeling like a rehearsal the house and I were doing together. In the morning, the activity log drew a picture I didn't like, not because it was dramatic, but because it was dull. A repetition of unlocked via keypad, user, guest at 317:06, invalid pin, jam detected, relocked. The same seconds, the same sequence. If I had been brave enough to pull up my own habits and lay them beside the log, I suspect they would have mapped too. The way I stood in the hallway at 10:12, listening before going to bed. The 6:41 a.m. unlock when I left to walk and clear the noise from my head. The 8:03 a.m. relock when I realized I'd left. EFT my wallet on the counter. The lock knew when I wanted in and when I needed out, and worse, it started anticipating me, humming awake a fraction of a second before my finger moved. I moved my flight up by a day, which is the closest I get to admitting anything. I texted Dana a generic and apologetic, "Work changed. I need to check out early, everything is fine." She sent a note about no problem, safe travels, thanks for the heads up. I packed in that tight way you do when you're trying not to let a floorboard squeak even though it doesn't matter. I wiped the counter as if covering my tracks from no one. At the door, my hand hovered over the numbers. I told myself I was being ridiculous, and then I pressed them anyway. The lock accepted me like it always had, and in the little breath before it relocked behind me, the building did that almost nothing noise again, the one that only means something because you have a place for it to land. On my flight, my email served me one last thing, the way your feed shows you what it's sure you want. "Thanks for staying," it began, the Airbnb auto message. "We hope to host you again." Under it, another from Yale Access. "We noticed unusual activity on your door last night. Consider replacing the batteries for best performance." The timestamp on that one? 3:17 a.m. Sent right as I was lying in a bed that tried to be a stranger but had learned me anyway. The rational part of me filed it under coincidence and misconfiguration. The part of me that still sometimes reaches for the chain out of muscle memory in my own apartment wished there had been a chain to reach for in that garden unit. I am not saying there was someone there. I'm saying sometimes a mechanism can teach a room your shape, and once it knows you, it keeps the hour for you even after you've left. The cancellation pinged my phone while I was still at the gate. "So sorry for the inconvenience. Unexpected plumbing issue at your reserved unit." The host's name was different from Chicago, but the cadence was the same. Apologies slid between exclamation points like sprinkles. Before I could start the scavenger hunt of new listings and new locations and new messages with different locks and different gate codes, they offered a lifeline. "We have a sister property across town. Same rate, better natural light, keyless entry. Want me to switch you?" I said yes, because sometimes the idea of starting over is worse than whatever waits. A car later, the driver dropped me on a leafy street that had a few too many permit-only signs and one wind-clacked for sale placard that made little windmill squeaks every time the breeze thought about picking up. The house was a narrow craftsman with a kind of pride in its paint job that read like a new owner's optimism. The sister property was around back, down a side walkway that smelled like wet cedar and dryer vents. The lockbox hung from the handrail like a barnacle. The host message said, "You'll find a tan lockbox. Code is 1205. Sturdy tug. She sticks sometimes with humidity. We left a welcome snack." The "she" made me smile. Apparently all doors are women when they're misbehaving. I flipped the lockbox down, punched in the numbers, heard the tiny clack of tumblers aligning, and slid out a key with a homemade label, EP2. The door itself did stick. I had to lean my shoulder into it and feel the wood give. Body memory from every old house I've ever lived in. The air inside had that mix of bleach and lemon oil furniture polish that says someone made a quick run-through. The light was soft, pulled through shears, and the living room was doing the same staged minimalism as 100 other rentals. Potted snake plant, low-profile couch. Textured throw, a local print of a skyline that might have been beloved by whoever lived here before and was now reduced to a decor bullet point in a spreadsheet. I put my bag down and had the sensation, not of home, nothing so neat, but of having walked a circuit that ended here before. I told myself it was management style. You know when a restaurant group opens 3 different places and you can tell by the chairs? Maybe this company bought the same tables, the same mugs, the same flimsy pans that warp the first time you put heat under them. I could make it elegant. Standardization. I told myself that, and then I opened the cabinet above the sink, and there it was, the mug I would have sworn was in Chicago. The same skitter of glaze down the handle. The same chip on the lip big enough to catch at the side of your mouth if you aren't careful. Faded cherry blossoms that looked printed from memory instead of an original. I held it and checked the chip the way you touch your tongue to a canker sore. I had a picture in my head of setting a teabag string over that exact chip a few weeks before. Maybe I was just following my own habits to the most recognizable shape in the cupboard. I put the mug down like it might betray me by being genuinely itself. The throw on the couch had the same fatigue at the flannel's edge, that loose stitching that comes from too many washes in machines that don't care. The kitchen runner had the same slightly warped pattern that makes you think it's not straight when it is. And the welcome snack? A mason jar with a ribbon and two biscotti pressed to the glass as if trying to escape. Another "we did something" gesture I've come to read as a veneer between me and rooms that aren't mine. On the coffee table sat a laminated house manual, and if I had been meaner, I would have placed bets on the phrasing before I turned the first page. Quiet hours. 10:08. Please don't move furniture. Don't open the basement door. Owner storage. The Wi-Fi password was the same combination of street name and random numbers I'd seen 2 cities ago, which is not statistically significant until your hands remember it before your eyes do. The page with local recommendations had the same list of coffee shops copied from a blog that copied from another blog with the same misplaced comma. The copies were so thorough, it looped from funny back to a little too slick, like being told a joke you laughed at last month and having to decide whether to pretend you're surprised. I'm not saying it was the same place. I'm saying that as I walked the perimeter, peeking into the bedroom, setting my bag by the closet with the sticky door, washing the travel grit from my hands under a faucet that sprayed a little sideways, I kept bumping into the feeling of having been there in a way I couldn't map to a calendar. It wasn't déjà vu so much as muscle memory with no story attached. I thought, fine, sister properties, same design package, same mug from a restaurant supply store, same throw purchased in a 3-pack. The brain likes patterns, and I had work in the morning. I made tea. I used a different mug. It didn't happen the first hour. It happened after my body had settled, which is the worst time for something to go strange because you've already committed to trust. I had my shoes off, my laptop open, a document with red track changes I was half drowning in. The couch's left cushion slumped at the corner like it had hosted too many apology naps. I tucked my heel under, realized I was twisting the throw fringe between my fingers the way I do when I'm thinking, and pulled a little too hard. The slipcover, the kind of stretchy gray that reads as clean in photos, puckered. I stood to smooth it and my hand hit something sharp under the fabric, a hard little paper burr catching my knuckle. I thought it would be a stray staple or a crumma. B hardened into a fossil. I lifted the cover and found an old Polaroid slid into the crease where the cushions meet the back, half concealed by that aluminum bar nobody thinks about when they sit down. It was face down. The back bore the faint ghost of an old sticker. Maybe someone had taped it somewhere once, and the edges were soft from handling. I slid it out without meaning to take in any of that, just following the object logic of remove foreign thing. When I turned it over, the room lost its depth for a second and went flat like a stage set. It was me, or someone with my jacket, my bad posture, my too long sleeves. The photo had that crisp flash look of a thing taken in a small room at night, the subject too lit, the corners drowning. I was standing at a counter I didn't recognize, leaning with one palm against laminate that had been scrubbed tired, a microwave in the background that belonged to another era of microwave. The mug in my other hand was the cherry blossom one, the chip angled toward the camera like a witness. On the wall behind me, half out of frame, was the same framed skyline print from the living room here, but hung above a radiator that wasn't in this house, beneath a small window with vertical blinds. I felt the wrongness in the angle, like someone had moved a painting 1 inch to the left without telling me. There was no date printed. Polaroids don't timestamp in that friendly way. Someone had written a number on the bottom border in ballpoint, 10/19. No year, no context, just a shorthand that might have been a date or a unit number or somebody's favorite calendar square. My brain offered that I travel for work. It is entirely possible that there exists an image of me in a kitchen like this, doing exactly this, because this is what we do in borrowed spaces. Make tea and lean on counters and stare at something while thinking of something else. But I don't take Polaroids, and I don't hand my phone to strangers to take candid shots of me standing alone, not in kitchens. The person who took this was close enough to see the fray at my left cuff, the cheap watch I wear when I'm worried about losing the nice one, the curve of my mouth in profile when I assume no one's looking. My first thought was not, this isn't me. It was, who else would? I flipped it back and forth in my hands and had that odd smell on my fingertips Polaroids have, that old fixative sweetness like a hotel lobby flower arrangement that's been there a day too long. The couch sighed when I sat down as if acknowledging we'd disturbed something. My phone buzzed. The host. Hey, hope you got in okay again. Let us know if you need anything. Again, if I'm honest, that word got in under my skin faster than the photo. I typed back, yes, all set, thanks, and stared at my own name under their message like proof of my existence in a thread in a world that made sense. I held the photo up to the lamp like illumination could conjure metadata. The tile in the corner of the frame was wrong for this kitchen. The grout ran a different way. The microwave was older. The one here was a sleek black box with unlit buttons. The outlet cover behind my hip in the photo had paint on the edges from a sloppy DIY job, a little t-shirt. Eyed line of semi-gloss, where here the covers were sharp and cheap and new. It was a different room that had been arranged to tell the same story. I remembered a different city entirely. Late flights and a bad Uber and being too tired to figure out the shower and a bathroom that got damp in the wrong corners, but I couldn't attach it to a street name or a month. I did what I always do when faced with a piece of evidence that makes no sense. I tried to make it small. Maybe a previous guest looked like me. Maybe the jacket was a common jacket. My jacket is not unique. Maybe the host takes Polaroids for their listing. I scrolled the photos. They were wide-angle realtor shots, empty of people, all good light and toothpaste white smiles on appliances. I opened my camera roll and scrolled back to October last year. I have a photo of a menu, a photo of a cat on a stoop that is definitely not from this city, a photo of my wrist where I'd scratched it on a luggage zipper. No Polaroid of me, no kitchen counter. The number written at the bottom of the Polaroid, 1019, matched the week those photos were taken. The jacket in the cat photo is the jacket in the Polaroid. That's as far as I could make myself go. When I lifted the slipcover to slide the photo back where I found it, the couch frame creaked in a note I recognized perfectly. I'd been startled by this exact creak somewhere else once and thought, character. Maybe that's all it was. The same bulk order of couches, the same bulk order of mugs, the same bulk order of framed skyline prints. A template so thorough it printed people too. I kept the Polaroid out on the coffee table for an hour like you keep a bug under a glass where you can see it and it can't do anything except be itself. I took a photo of it with my phone and zoomed until the pixels started to block. I checked my own watch in the bathroom mirror to see if the notch on the strap matched the one in the picture. It did. I texted a friend who has a better sense of time than I do. Where was I in October? He sent back a photo of me on his couch, feet under me, same jacket, leaning too far forward to tell a story. He wrote, "You were here on the 18th, left on the 19th for that thing in Portland? Boise? You're always at an airport. Why?" I typed, just trying to remember if I stayed at a place with a microwave from the 90s. He replied with a skull emoji and, "That's a cursed sentence." I could have messaged the host with a photo of the photo and a question mark. If I were a different version of myself, I would have, but I could see the script play out. "Oh, that must be from a previous guest. So sorry for the oversight." Followed by, "We'll have housekeeping do a deeper sweep." I could also see the other, worse script. "I have no idea what that is." And then me sleeping in a place where I'd told a stranger I found a picture of myself that shouldn't exist. I tell myself I'm a rational person. Rational people do not invite new variables into a space they're trying to control with a too-hot shower and a tight bag zipper and the bedtime illusion of locking down enough surfaces to sleep. My internal explanations did their work like ants, carrying pieces of discomfort back into manageable nests. Sister property means shared inventory. It means someone ordered 20 of those mugs, and statistically, 2 have the same chip because that's where they're weakest. It means the throws loose stitching is a factory defect and not a sign that fibers ember my hands. It means the photo could have been staged or that my brain is looking for my silhouette in another body because that's what brains do when they're presented with a close enough. The handwriting, 1019, could be anybody's, could be a unit number or an instruction to hang something on the 19th of a different month, could be serendipity connecting points. I want to be lines because lines are how you navigate. I did small design changes in the room to prove to myself that I had purchase on it. I turned the framed skyline print so the signature in the corner was upside down. I swapped the chipped mug with a plain white one to the front of the cabinet. I folded the throw lengthwise instead of corner to corner. I set the Polaroid on the fridge under a wooden magnet shaped like a peach, local branding pressed into domesticity, and told myself it would be exactly where I left it in the morning because this was a place to sleep, not a haunted house. I brushed my teeth and watched myself in a mirror that wasn't centered over the sink and wanted to fix it with my hands. Sleep came obliquely. It happens that way in unfamiliar beds. You angle into it. I woke once to the late train wail that passes through every city like a whistle you know from childhood. I woke again to the particular click of the heater coming on and pressed my ear to the pillow to pretend I wasn't listening. When I went into the kitchen for water at some hour that the body doesn't like, the fridge light came up and made the Polaroid stark. It looked more harmless under fluorescent. It looked like a found object from a thrift store. I went back to bed with my mouth tasting like the inside of a paper bag and made what bargains you make when you're alone. Let me have this one night without stories, and I will not make stories where there aren't any. In the morning, the frame print was straight again. It might be that I didn't angle it enough to see the change. It might be the house settling and nudging it. It might be one of those things you misremember on purpose because the alternative is that something else in the room is participating. The chipped mug was back in front, handle facing right like a showroom. The throw lay with its fringe just so. The peach magnet held nothing. The photo wasn't on the fridge. The couch creaked the same note when I lifted the slipcover, and there it was, slid back into the crease against the aluminum bar, face down like it had never moved. I didn't say anything to anyone. I made tea and used a paper cup. I worked from the kitchen table because the couch suddenly felt too intimate. I booked another place for the next night. Hotel, lobby, neutral carpets, key card that forgets you the second you step away from the door. I left the key on the counter with a small thank you note I'd have written regardless, and locked the sticky door and listened to it click all the way closed. On the rideshare to the hotel, I scrolled through my camera roll until my thumb hurt and didn't find anything that would make the story neat. I still have the photo I took of the Polaroid on my phone. Sometimes I pull it up and try to decide if the angle of my shoulder is an angle only I would recognize. I've stayed in a lot of rooms that borrow each other's furniture. That week I learned I don't like the idea of a room borrowing me. If there's an explanation, it sits in my head beside other facts I can't apply to real life. That big property managers shop in bulk. That cleaners miss things that hide at couch edges, that human faces are pattern matchers and unreliable narrators both. I am not saying it was me, I'm saying the world is flatter in these places than we think, and sometimes the template takes more than it gives back. I took the off-season rate because I needed quiet, and the ocean I thought could supply both. The listing promised marine ambiance, which in my head reads as gulls, a ribbon of sky, a steady horizon I could pin thoughts to. The cottage was at the end of a salt-stiffened road, shingles gone soft and gray, a porch with a bench that had seen better paint. I parked beside a hulk of a lobster trap that had been repurposed into a planter. The air was clean in the way that carries the memory of rot, kelp, creosote pilings, something that had lived and gone back to its elements. The wind found every metal thing and made it sing a little. I tasted salt before I unlocked the door. The host had messaged ahead. "Welcome. Tide chart is on the fridge. Please squeegee the sliders in the morning. Salt film can etch. Dehumidifier is set to coastal. LOL. If it storms, crack the bathroom window to balance pressure." That parenthetical laugh didn't make it less strange that there was a knob on a machine labeled coastal, like it was a mood. Inside was knotty pine and practical furniture, the kind of place that photographs easy and lives a little crooked. Baseboard heaters clicked in a way that sounded like tiny knuckles. A pair of copper binoculars sat on the windowsill beside a folded paper chart with penciled circles at certain dates. On the fridge, taped in blue painter's tape, was a tide table for the week. H, 8:09 a.m., L, 1:48 a.m., H, 8:36 p.m., the little arrows and plus-minus symbols that mean nothing until you start checking them like a superstition. The sliding glass door faced a low, stubborn yard of dune grass, then a run of granite, then the mercilessly constant motion of water. Past the deck, the ocean breathed against the rocks in a rhythm I felt in my molars. Inhale, then a clatter of pebbles loosening in the exhale. There was a squeegee hanging by a tibias. Ein loop from a nail next to the door, brine crust frosting its edge like candy. The glass already bore a film. My fingertip left a line in it, squeak soft, not quite wet. I wiped it with my sleeve without meaning to, and the fabric came away with a fine grit like ground shell. The bathroom mirror was a porthole of the same phenomena. The humidity in the room laced it with a soft fog, a milkiness that made my face look grainy at the edges. When the vent fan drew its tired breath, little currents appeared in the condensation, trails the size of capillaries. It would have been pretty if I hadn't been primed by the host's note to think of what salt etching meant. The idea that the environment leaves its handwriting, and once it does, you don't get it out. There's a cruelty to the sea that feels clean. It does not negotiate with your desire to keep things shiny. The first night, I learned the small noises that would play at the edges of sleep. A distant buoy's bell, hesitant and then sure, the soft groan of the deck under the wind's hand, water in the baseboards like mice. I opened the kitchen drawer and found a damp little stack of dishcloths and beneath them a plastic bag of silica packets for wet days with a smiley face in black marker. The tide chart caught me every time I crossed the room. I read it the way you read hotel Bible verses you don't believe in but find comforting by the bedside. It felt like permission to plan. It felt like being told when the world would tip one way and then the other. Somewhere between the clatter and the off-season quiet, I slipped into thinking of those times as something more than numbers. Before bed, I cupped my hands on the glass of the slider just to see the ocean in the last light. My reflection came up with the yard and the deck, me layered over gulls and bad grass and a sky that couldn't decide which gray to be. The room behind me wavered in the reflection, and if you were feeling romantic, you could say it looked like a second, thinner living room laid over the first. I told myself glasses O-sided drama. I turned off the lamp and what remained was the white seam of surf and a rectangle of myself floating in a house that for now would be kind. What woke me wasn't drama. It was the mundane interval of my body needing water. The cottage had cooled itself around me, the baseboard clicks further apart, the blankets heavy with the kind of damp that makes your skin feel borrowed. The clock on the stove, the only one I'd set, showed 1:42 a.m. in a green as flat as fish scales. Low tide, the chart had said, was 1:48. A dumb coincidence, but it filed itself somewhere I could find it later. I padded to the bathroom with my phone face down in my hand so I wouldn't grab light I couldn't let go of. The mirror wore a fog like a veil. The fan had given up for the night. When I ran the tap, steam drew swirls in the existing mist, and beneath the moisture a different texture came through, like breath on a window after fingers have already spelled something on it. Letters assemble themselves in moisture. It is the oldest trick in shared bathrooms. I've laughed at "wash me" on car windows. I have never felt squeamish about reappearing messages because the explanation is so available. But when the moisture evened and the beads found their boundaries, the clean places were letters I wouldn't have chosen. L and O and W meant nothing on their own, but low under them had a number, the top part of it soft where someone had pressed too lightly, 148. I don't mean the ghost of it. I don't mean a hint. I mean the definite negative space of a finger having written it clean sometime before, in strokes that felt too measured to be casual. I wiped the mirror with the heel of my hand because that's what you do when you feel tricked by a surface. The film smeared, and beneath it, like something you can't blur, the letters insisted again. I did the dumb thing of putting my fingertip next to its. Oh, the one, and tracing the same angle in the air to see if it matched my hand. It didn't comfort me. What would? That my finger wasn't the finger that had done it. The sound of the tide reached into the bathroom, the pull and hush, like a breath drawn through teeth. I rinsed a glass and drank standing at the sink because sitting back down in that bed without intervening would have been admitting how small the house felt right then. On my way back through the living room, the slider was a mirror with a horizon line and a low stripe of cloud. I put my palms to it the way I had earlier, some part of me wanting to anchor to the cold. The room gathered on the surface again. My reflection was me in a sweatshirt, the lamp's dull gold halo beside my face, the couch behind me with its folded blanket. I looked at my hand in the glass and then at my actual hand. There was a heartbeat of delay. Not enough to be a trick, not enough to build a horror on, just the sense that the glass was compiling its version of me from a slightly older draft. I did it again, quick, lifting my left hand and then my right. The left in the glass hesitated and caught up. The right moved just ahead, a missynced video call with myself as the person with a poor connection. Behind my shoulder in the reflection, the tide chart on the fridge wasn't where it was in the room. It was tilted a little, as if a clumsy tape job had loosened, as if the wind through the cracked bathroom window, which I had not cracked, it wasn't storming, had gotten in there and worried at it. I turned around. The real chart was straight, taped clean. The fridge held a magnet shaped like a lighthouse I hadn't noticed before, bright and silly. In the glass, the lighthouse magnet was lower. Not gone, just lower, like I'd moved it in one life and not this one. A gull's cry cut sharp through everything, and outside at the granite edge the ocean did what the chart promised. It slacked, then tipped toward filling again. When I looked back at the bathroom mirror on my second trip for water, because Thursday. T is a symptom of not wanting to climb into a bed where you feel watched. The word low had softened in the same places my first wipe had smeared, but the numbers were crisp again and there was a second line under it not yet fully formed. H, just an H. And a curve like the start of an 8. The kitchen chart had H 8:09 a.m. It was probably a coincidence that my brain made away with because brains love to steal meaning. I watched the beads race one another in gravity's slow riddle down the glass until they made the shapes they were going to make without needing my consent. Back at the slider, the room on the other side of the glass had a timing problem that started to feel like a choice. I put my empty glass on the counter, and in the reflection, it left a ring it hadn't left yet. I turned the lamp off and on, and the reflection did the opposite a beat later, then caught up like it forgave me for experimenting. I told myself double pane glass can do odd things to light. I told myself the deck and the ocean bring their own moving mirror into the room and the rest of the room leans over the threshold to meet it. I told myself all the things that sound reasonable because they are. I slept because the body will keep its appointments with rest even when the mind misses its own. When I woke past dawn, the mirror was just a mirror again, salted at the edges. L148 and H809 had evaporated with the fog. The chart on the fridge was straight as an apology. The lighthouse magnet was exactly where I remembered moving it in the middle of the night, except I hadn't moved it. The squeegee waited by the slider. In the grooves along its rubber edge, crystals had formed in a line like punctuation. In daylight, I had an explanation for everything, and I tried them on like coats. The mirror remembers what hands tell it to remember. The last guest was a Tide nerd who liked writing times in moisture. Salt crystals guide condensation along their edges. The slider is two panes at war over which reality to report. I was tired and spooked and therefore unreliable. None of these were lies. None of them undid the part of me that had watched my own reflection make a choice I hadn't made yet. I texted the host the polite version. Hey, quick question, does the bathroom mirror sometimes hold on to old messages when it fogs up, wiped a thing and it came back, huh? They replied fast. Oh gosh, yes. The salt air makes everything ghosty. We use barkeeper's friend to deep clean the glass between stays, but finger oils plus salt are like permanent until they aren't. Squeegee helps with the slider. It was as generous a rationalization as any, emoji included. I took the powdered cleanser from under the sink and did the kind of circles that should erase history. The mirror shined. It shined in a way that made the light kinder. Later that night, after a day spent writing at the table and pretending I didn't check the tide by the minute, the letters came back when the room breathed damp. This time, H836. The right numbers for that evening. I opened my mouth to say the word coincidence and heard it dissolve on my tongue like salt. There was a way to make it smaller that involved props. I put a strip of painter's tape across the slider, low at my knee, and wrote my name on it, to have a thing that belonged to me in both rooms at once. In the real room, the tape was green, centered, the letters shaky from writing on glass. In the reflected room, I had placed it half an inch to the left. I thought I could say the angle was different. Reflections cheat. Then an hour later, the tape in the reflected room was centered, and the tape in mine had let one end peel as dry adhesive always does. The ocean ran its machines against the granite. It knocked, gently, on the same ledge every few seconds until you stopped noticing you were being knocked at. I went down to the rocks at low tide the next morning to do the human thing of seeing the mechanism so I wouldn't have to feel The weed-glossed stone was slick as polished leather, the kind of dangerous that almost flatters you when you navigate it without falling. The water, pulled back, exposed the workings, the channels it liked, the muscle of its will. I watched a man in a trim yellow slicker, so archetypal he read as staged, walk along the far jetty and pour a bucket of something back into the sea. He didn't wave. On my way back up the scrubbed path, I paused at the deck and looked through the slider from outside. My reflection appeared again, sun-sharp, my face cut into squinting lines, my hand lifted to shade my eyes. In the glass, on the inside, my hand was down by my side. It rose after, delayed, saluting a sun I was done with. Checkout hung over me as a fix. Hotels erase you the second you're gone. That's a comfort, I understand. I cleaned the kitchen enough to feel decent. I folded the blanket the way it was when I got there. The tide chart taped to the fridge didn't look at me so much as past me, toward a schedule I couldn't upset with my little decisions. I ran the squeegee down the slider in measured strokes like a ritual and watched the salt water run in clean straight lines to the track and collect in a shallow glittering bevel. I wiped the bathroom mirror a final time. It looked good enough that I almost laughed at myself for everything I'd assembled into a story. As I zipped my bag and checked under the bed, the acts we performed to give endings weight. The mirror clouded at the edges, and then in the center the letters came with terrible neatness, drawn from absence. L1205. My checkout was noon. My rideshare app had a pickup for 12:05. I stood there with my mouth half open like something was going to fall out that would make it reasonable. I whispered it, I think, about no. Not to the mirror or the salt or the number, but to the idea that anything knew my timing but me. I left the bathroom light on purpose so I could pretend warmth had done it. I left the house at 11:58 because it felt like cheating. The ocean, mid-laugh on its way back in, didn't care. The cough and drag on the rocks continued whether I took notice or not. Back inland, months later, a foggy shower will sometimes make a ghost line on my apartment mirror nobody else would notice. Thin as breath, curving like a 2 and then thinking better of it. I keep the Tide app I downloaded as a joke. I find myself checking it from 300 miles away and feeling that particular relief when a number on a screen matches some private pressure you've already named. I don't say the ocean wrote to me. I say the glass kept a conversation going and the house let me overhear. I say there are rooms arranged by weather instead of people, and if you're quiet, they will practice themselves a minute ahead or a minute behind, whether you're in them or not. I booked the loft because I thought I needed space and blankness and daylight to rinse the last few weeks out of my head. The photos were all glass and plants and polished concrete floors, high windows with long white curtains that looked like they'd billow on command. Arts District Industrial Chic, the listing said, which is a sentence you can't prosecute for lying, because everywhere wants to be that now. The directions were crisp, a keypad at the building's front, a second code at the unit, elevator to the 3rd floor. Please note there is a small interior door labeled Owner Storage, alarmed. Don't attempt to open, it will trigger our system. Everything else is for guest use. Enjoy. There was a smiley face after enjoy, as if the door were a pet you might worry about. The lobby smelled like cold cement and someone's citrus cleaner. Outside, trucks moved on Alameda with that low freight sound that sits under your day whether you want it to or not. A coffee roaster somewhere nearby exhaled a sweetness that made the diesel almost nice. The loft door accepted my code and gave me that little motorized purr I've learned to trust. Inside was as promised. White walls, a kitchen along one side with a steel worktop, a long rug laid like a runway from the entry to the living space. 2 fig trees I didn't believe were real. A mezzanine sleeping area up a black metal ship's ladder, mattress laid low under a string of bulbs. And there, before the bathroom and off the entry hall, exactly as the host had warned me, was the door. Not a closet with a cute knob, not a supply cabinet tucked away. A real, heavy interior door painted the same matte gray as the ducts overhead, with a brushed metal label affixed at eye level. Owner Storage, alarmed. In smaller letters stenciled below was Do Not Open. 2 tiny, old-school surface mount contacts sat at the top of the jamb where you'd expect a security sensor, the magnet on the door, and the switch on the frame. A wire chased down the casing in a neat white sleeve, then vanished behind the drywall. It looked serious in a way that domestic things rarely do. I could hear something behind it, a hum at the edge of hearing, the sound a fan makes when it's not tired yet. I told myself, mechanical room, utilities. Maybe the host keeps staging props and paint cans. Maybe the building's risers and valves run through there, and because this neighborhood is a patchwork of old warehouses patched up into condos, nothing lines up with where we think healthy architecture should put sounds. The evacuation map by the front door, the standard glossy print with exit arrows and "You are here" in red, confused me a little. Our loft was a rectangle with a bathroom box and an open square for the living area. No closet indicated along the entry wall. Where the owner storage was, the map's little box was blank. It was bright in that way. Concrete apartments are. The light has nowhere soft to hide, so it just lives in the air. Every sound behaved accordingly. The refrigerator motor's startup had a clean edge. The grate of a skateboard 2 floors below sounded like a zipper you could see. The base of the mezzanine ladder thunked when I put my palm to it. Somewhere above, the building's big HVAC drifted in a deep, regular breath, and under it, from the owner storage door, a narrow thread of tone settled low in my ear, more vibration than sound. If I moved toward the door, it was there. If I stood in the kitchen, it vanished into the rest. At first, the hum seemed reasonable, like a white noise machine someone forgot to turn off. But it had a quality pure enough to feel deliberate, less like air being pushed and more like a single note being held by a string instrument in another room. If I put my hand flat to the paint, the door felt cool in a way that suggested a big void on the other side. I told myself that's what storage is, the kind of cool you get when air doesn't circulate because it doesn't need to. I could have made myself stop there. I could have decided, like a decent guest, that the interior geography of someone else's property was exactly as much my business as the backs of their kitchen drawers. On the ceiling, the smoke detector wore its usual scowl. The little red LED blinked every minute like they all do, a pulse the color of a cherry caught in ice. Later, I'd swear the timing changed, But that first afternoon it blinked with the blank confidence of machinery that only cares about rhythm. The host had left a manual on the counter in the same laminated plastic you get at copy shops. Wi-Fi, trash room, rules. Owner storage is alarmed and connected to a central service, it said again. Please don't tamper. Alarm will dispatch. The tone of dispatch felt too official for such a cozy manual with a section called Our Fave Tacos. By sunset, the big windows had gone the color of fruit skins, and the cranes down on the river looked like they were reaching to adjust the sky. The city outside thrummed with a dress rehearsal energy, trucks idling, music leaking from roll-up doors, someone arguing affectionately on a phone in Spanish. Inside, the hum from the owner's storage pulled itself up a half step. If you've ever tuned a guitar, you know the way a string can be just slightly wrong and then settle. The door did that without, as far as I could tell, anything changing around it. I told myself pipes warm and cool, fans cycle, metal makes small choices at its own pace. When the outside lights went blue and the plant shadows laid themselves thin across the rug, I poured a drink and walked the perimeter the way you do in a new place, touching light switches, checking latches, thumbing the edge of the bathroom mirror to see how it's mounted. At the owner's storage door, I had the childish urge to put my ear to it and listen. I did, because I was alone and because the art of me that always wants to know is louder in rooms that pretend to be simple. Through the door, the hum had more shape. Not music, not words. The contour of someone warming up their voice but never singing. The smoke detector's LED blinked. Once. Pause. Once again. A longer pause. I turned away from the door. It blinked again, feeling suddenly less like a heartbeat and more like a metronome. When I climbed the ladder to the mezzanine, the blinking rode with me across the room the way some sounds attach to you and aren't where you think they are. I lay down, let the city speak through the windows, and told myself the sign on the gray door was a legal sentence, not a warning meant personally for me. The first night put me on slow simmer. Every time the hum in the door shifted, my skin registered it before I could find the source. Ordinary things grew edges. The fridge cycled. My upstairs neighbor rolled a chair. Someone's bass thudded in a womp-womp heartbeat 2 buildings over. I let it all pass. Then the hum went from line to question. I was at the kitchen island with my laptop, a document open with comments that multiplied when I blinked. The room wore that late LA dusk, the kind that's not shade so much as a softening of color. The owner's storage hum slid and landed on a pitch that made a glass on the drying rack vibrate against the rack's wire. It was small, but it made the hairs along my forearms change their mind about lying flat. I looked at the glass as if it could answer why it cared. I said out loud to the door, "Okay," which is what I say when a piece of furniture wobbles and I decide to deal with it later. The smoke detector blinked. 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, pause. It was nothing until it did it again. 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3. The pattern wrote itself in my head as if the room had taught me without my consent what counts it liked. I went over to the door and put my ear to it again, palm flat. Sound travels weird through metal. What I heard wasn't a voice but the shape of one, the way humans push air, vowels in it, or the idea of vowels. Then, like a child making a joke, the hum hopped up and then back down, 2 notes close together, a sigh disguising itself as play. I stepped back. The LED on the smoke detector answered, blink, 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 blink. I don't know how to explain that I knew it was an answer except that the timing was wrong for coincidence. You learn the room's metronome by accident. When it slips, it sounds personal. I picked up my phone and opened the host thread. "Hey, quick question about the owner storage alarmed door," I typed. "Is there equipment running in there? It's humming a bit. Just want to make sure nothing's overheating." I watched the typing bubble come and go. "Hi, thanks for checking," they wrote back. "Yes, it's a small mechanical closet shared with the adjacent unit's plumbing. Totally normal to hear some movement. The alarm is only if the door opens. Please don't worry." I wanted to ask about the blinking too. Instead, I typed, "Got it. THX. There's an evacuation map in every building in this city. I had noticed ours, but I hadn't read it until then. I stood in the doorway, turned the page around to orient it with the room, and followed the little lines. The place the gray door sat was a solid rectangle on the map with no marking. No closet. No mechanical room. Beyond our wall, according to the plan, was the corridor to the stairwell and then open air. If the closet was shared with the neighbor was approximately a fire exit and a concrete void. I put on music to prove I was still the one in charge of what sounds happened in my own paid square of space. It helped in the way distractions help. But then somewhere in track 3, the hum behind, and the door found the same key and slid along with the song like a bad backing vocal, half a beat behind. I stopped the song and the hum kept the last bar as if finishing a thought. I laughed, a small, unwilling sound. The smoke detector blink-metriced at me, a blink, 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 then a longer gap. A deep breath before the next phrase. I tapped the door with a knuckle, light, as if you can be polite with a slab of painted steel. Talk, talk. The alarm did not sound. I knocked a little harder, thinking if there was a pressure sensor, maybe I'd feel the stupid satisfaction of tripping it and hearing some official sound tell me I was seen. From behind, the hum answered in an ascending interval, doo-doo, like a person thinking of the next line in a song they don't remember all the way. I didn't want it to be music. The world is easier when machines behave like machines. I knocked again, twice. The lights in the room, which I hadn't noticed were halogens until they warmed, did something that shouldn't be caused by knocking. A shimmer. The smoke detector blinked at a new speed, 5 pulses in a run. I was counting at that point. That's what the mind does when it's trying not to say other words. I turned everything off I could. The air conditioning, the vent fan, the fridge, unplugged it with a childish, dramatic flourish, and then, immediately embarrassed by my own superstition, plugged it back in. The hum didn't care. It tapered and then came back like it had chosen me over my attempts at quiet. I held my phone to the door and recorded the sound because that's what we do now when we need proof of a thing. In playback, the recording sounded like a room tone until, halfway through, the file caught the moment the hum rose and split, 2 notes, then a soft whistle not in the original. It might have been my own breath. It might have been my own desire for what a microphone could interpret. At some point, the mezzanine felt too far from the exit, so I made up the couch, which was a silly gesture given the building had 2 separate codes between me and the street. I lay with my head toward the door because turning my back to it felt like a dare. The LED in the ceiling became the whole world. I knew its timing well enough to feel when it missed. 2 blinks, 3 blinks, space that could have fit another. The hum in the door shaped itself into something like a lullaby you can't place. The phrase rising on the 2nd note and falling on the 4th, like the song's words had vowels but no consonants. At 2:11 a.m., the smoke detector chirped one clean electronic chirp that meant battery soon in every apartment I've ever suffered. I got up to stand on the kitchen island and reached to press its test button like an idiot thinking a test would put it in a mood to cooperate. The red LED went solid for a heartbeat and then back to its blink. On the way down, I paused and watched the owner's storage, my balance at risk, palms braced on the edges of the cabinet. The hum slid. I swear to God it matched the rhythm of my exhale when I let it out slow to keep my hands steady. "Okay," I said, again, to no one and to the door. The word tasted like metal. I wondered if the alarm that would dispatch was listening for more than magnets. Daylight threw the room into facts. The hum faded into everything else. The plant leaves did their quiet photosynthesizing. A construction crane beeped its reverse beeps 3 blocks away and ha-ha'd me for the way I'd watched a red LED like a fortune teller. The evacuation map remained the evacuation map. The gray door remained a door, paint nicked at hip height where someone had once bungled something through. I made coffee and drank it standing up like you do when you don't want to attach the body to any particular piece of furniture. My me. Sage to the host stayed half composed. "Is it possible the mechanical closet is also—" I erased it and sent nothing. The practical explanations took their places like obliging actors. Shared plumbing means ghost noises. Old buildings translate everything into song if you're wired anxious enough to listen. Security systems blink in patterns because that's how they test themselves. Some central panel somewhere sends a pulse, and the heads report back by flashing. Of course, an alarm door hums. There's always a transformer or a fan in the company of secrets. I counted the smoke detector blinks while I buttered toast. The pattern from the night before refused to show up in the morning, like a joke you tell at breakfast that dies on your tongue. I went hunting anyway because that's when I am. Basement level, there's a door marked mechanical with a key cylinder the size of a game token. I stood there like a person with business and listened to fans dump heat into the world. It all sounded reasonable. The elevator clanged in a way that made me trust it less. A neighbor with a shaved head and a box of bleaching powder nodded hello and then looked down at my shoes as if to say, "You're not from here." I smiled like we shared a secret we didn't. Back in the loft, I pulled the evacuation map from its little frame and found a QR code for the building's fire life safety plan. I scanned it and skimmed while my coffee cooled. The floor plan listed the units, the risers, the utility closets. Our wall was a rated assembly, double stud with insulation. No mechanical closet shown inside our footprint. The space where the owner's storage should have been was hatched as void. Behind that, according to the plan, was a corridor leading to a locked stair. I told myself plans get updated badly. A storage closet can be carved out without the PDF catching up. An architect can type void. Because it's not a room the fire department wants us in. The rationalizations worked like sunscreen, necessary, not permanent. In the afternoon, when the light leaned a certain way and the plant shadows went spidery over the rug, the hum returned to its more musical version. I whistled, soft, not to provoke, but because it felt dangerous to let the only voice in the room belong to a door. I tried a simple ascending interval. The hum did not answer. I tried again, descending. The hum slid down 2 steps and then back up as if it were correcting me, not imitating. I laughed unkindly. I carried my laptop to the mezzanine and then back down to signal I didn't care. When I covered the smoke detector's LED with a small square of masking tape because I wanted my world to be less punctuated, the blink found other places to live. The power strip under the media console wore its own tiny red light, which started to look like it pulsed in time with the not music. The router flickered. The microwave's clock, unset blank, showed a phantom 8 for half a second like a ghost trying on a body. I told myself I was making patterns on purpose. That night, the hum became companionable in the way a refrigerator does after you've lived with it. I recognized its cycles. I understood when it would lift and settle. The LED blink wrote little poems I refused to memorize. Around 1 a.m., I set my phone to record again and propped it against the baseboard by the door because I was tired of lying to myself about who I was. I lay on the couch and let my eyes sting and thought of the phrase, owner storage, alarmed, like a sentence out of a test I hadn't prepared for. I considered what an alarm is besides a device. I considered the way a door can be written warning and a person too. Dream and wake got confused maybe then. I had the sense of the hum long enough to feel it match the shape of my breath. I had the sense of words forming at the edge of hearing, the soft vowels of a language I should have been born knowing. Because it had the sound of a house you grew up in, the one you can navigate in the dark. I had the sense that if I put my palm to the door again, it would be warm this time, not cool. I did it. It was still cool. The LED blinked its deliberate 2-3. Somewhere above us, water rushed through the stack. My phone recorded too much silence to be useful. Morning again, and I was suddenly petty. I stood on the ladder and pressed the smoke detector test. It wailed its electronic test tone, a sound like an emergency you don't believe in, and then went quiet. The hum behind the door held. I knocked once, soft, not a challenge. The hum rose and then fell, as if acknowledging, as if done. I packed my bag slower than necessary, listening. I sent the host my checkout time and a thumbs up because being a normal guest was the only control I had. Thank you, they replied. Hope the stay was restful. Reminder, the alarm door is only for owner use. Please don't attempt to open. The reminder landed like a reply to a thing I hadn't typed. I didn't open it. I didn't try. I imagine you want me to say I did, that I peeled the sensor off, that the alarm shrieked, that there was nothing behind it but a tidy tangle of pipes singing their metal song. I imagine a simple explanation would feel kinder. I don't have one. I have an audio file with nothing useful on it and a memory of an LED learning, briefly, to speak in the same meter as my breath. Back home, every time the smoke detector blinks in my hallway, I see the phrase on that gray label and feel my shoulder pull toward closed doors like they're magnets. I walk past storage rooms in the basements of buildings and hold my breath the way you do when passing a cemetery. It is not that I think something was trapped. It is not that I think something alive was waiting. It's that I learned there's a difference between a door that is alarmed because it will set something off, and a door that is alarmed because it has been worried long enough by the sound of a person on the other side of it. I booked the A-frame because I needed a room shaped like a thought I hadn't had yet. The photos were all steep triangles and soft wood, a deck tucked into pines, a triangular window that made the sky look deliberate. The listing said Smoky Mountains, minutes to trails, and then a list of cautions that felt like a dad clearing his throat. Steep ship stairs to loft, not suitable for small children or mobility issues. Please use handrail. Remove shoes. Bears are active. Quiet hours after 10. There was a line about the stairs that made me smirk. 12 treads exactly to the loft. Please mind your footing at night. As if counting were part of the experience, a scavenger hunt clue slipped into liability language. The drive wound me past gas stations selling jars of something pickled and handmade honey signs leaning in ditches. By the time my car crunched into the gravel pull-off, the dusk had started to make a ceremony of ordinary things. Spider silk like wires between saplings. The way the A-frame's roof made a perfect V against a sky happily busy with birds. The air held that mountain damp, green and brown at once, and the porch boards gave me their first low complaint when I stepped on them. The lockbox did its combination clack, and the door opened onto a slice of another geometry. Cedar walls, a lot of air, stairs climbing in the first third of the room like an invitation you could trip on if you didn't respect it. Shipstairs is a generous term. It was a flight that wanted to be a ladder, and a ladder trying to pretend it was a staircase. Narrow treads, open risers, a rail at shoulder height an inch too smooth. The wood was blonde and honest, knotted and varnished thin, no rug runner to pretend this was a house. The loft perched above like a bunk, mattress ankle-high beneath the triangle window, a little reading lamp like a firefly on the nightstand. Down below, a samsarwotsa. All sofa, a table with a salt crust of old tea rings, a kitchen that meant it when it said 2 burners. A poster about bear safety tacked above the coat hooks. Make noise, keep distance, secure trash. Without meaning to, I counted the stairs on my first trip up with my bag. I do that anyway. Some internal metronome clicks on at stair 1 and is only satisfied when it arrives at the top with a number. 12, even, as promised. I felt a childish satisfaction like the listing and I had passed a test between us. The wood under my feet had the give of old joists doing their best. At the landing, I paused, palm on the rail, and breathed in the hot caramel smell of resin warmed by afternoon sun. The ceiling fan turned whoosh, 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 like it wanted to carry the smell around and couldn't quite. The host's manual lay on the table, polite in laminated plastic. Welcome. Our stairs are steep. Please use the handrail. At night, turn on the stair light. I found the switch, a line of little LEDs tucked under the lip of each tread that would make the staircase a glowing ladder in the dark. Cute, I thought, and also smart. The manual had other little mountain compromises. The roof amplifies rain, the deck can grow slick with dew, flashlight by the door. The caution felt thorough without being scared. I told myself I would be careful and then immediately walk the deck's perimeter barefoot because I'm a hypocrite when I think I'm alone. From the railing, the trees made shifting walls. Between trunks, the ridgeline crouched like a sleeping animal. The only sound was the persistent small work of insects, a soft metallic drip from the gutter where last week's rain had found a new path, and the occasional far-off car down on the 2-lane, the way you hear traffic when the wind carries it up a ravine like a message from someone you don't know. Inside again, the little LED dots under the steps had the shy look of lights waiting to be needed. I ran my hand along the guardrail and felt a splinter catch and then think better of it. 12, I told myself. 12 up, 12 down. Simple. That first hour I moved my bag into the loft and set it where the mattress stopped pretending to be a bed and became a platform. I found the place on the floor where the boards lied and creaked and made a mental note. Avoid that knot at night. The kitchen window overlooked a splash of laurel and a path where deer had decided property lines meant less to them than to us. The little guest book, actual paper and pen, was a surprise. Nothing was dramatic. I read a few entries waiting for water to boil. Saw a bear. Stairs are a doozy. Worth it for the sunrise. Someone doodled a tiny triangle with a smile. I wrote nothing. You don't write before you know what to say. Around sunset, the LEDs under the steps made small halos even in the remaining light. I flicked them on and off twice. The path of light up to the loft looked like an idea drawn by a child. Simple, declarative. It felt safe in the daylight. It felt like a promise. I held on to that little confidence harder than I want to admit, the way you hold on to smooth banisters with just 2 fingers to prove you don't really need them. The house changed when the outside pressed its face up against the glass. The triangle window went dark like a mouth you suddenly notice, and the deck boards took dew with a soft sound I wouldn't have recognized if I hadn't been listening for something to name how night arrives. I ate a lot of crackers with cheese and a mean apple and drank water with the greed city air teaches you. I turned on the step lights and went out to the deck anyway, because the stars in a place like this make you think rules are for other people. It was colder by 1 degree than comfortable, enough to make my skin clue in to its own edges. Trees moved in a blacker black than the sky. Somewhere down in the trees, a rustle and a pause set my shoulders up around my ears before common sense found the word squirrel. Coming back, I had 1 foot inside and 1 foot still on the deck when the house's steep geometry made itself known. The step lights threw brave little pools, but the room between them felt like a trick. I lifted my foot, expecting the first stair. My toe met wood a fraction sooner than my muscle memory expected. Not a trip, not a fall, a correction. I laughed a little at myself at the way your bones write checks your eyes don't cash. I counted out loud going up because I wanted to hear my own voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The word came out on its own. My mouth put a syllable in the air my feet swore to. 13 sat there like a coin someone else had placed. I stood with my hand on the rail and my heart doing that embarrassed sprint you do in crosswalks when you've misjudged the timing and a car lets you live anyway. I counted the treads with the flat of my hand. 1 board, 2 board, manual labor glued together into safety. 12 pieces of wood. My body had moved 13 times. That's the closest I can get to explaining it without you starting to think I'm telling a story. You lift your foot for a distance, and something inserts itself into that distance and makes a landing. Your ankle thanks it. Your mind resents it. I went down immediately because that's what I do when I don't believe myself. The undertread LEDs made the risers look deeper than they were. I held the rail with more hand than before. 12 down. At the bottom, I stood on the mat with its big, graphic, bare silhouette like a joke you can buy in a tourist town, and tested my weight left to right like the house was a boat, and I needed to learn its balance. Back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then a breath my body took for a step and a piece of wood where the breath expected air. 13. I put a fingertip of chalk from the host's hiking kit on the first riser and numbered them. 1 on the bottom nose, all the way up to 12 at the top. The chalk looked temporary and defiant, like it was trying to hold the world in place with minimal confidence. I took a photo of the staircase from below with my phone, all the little lights haloing the numbers into something festive. I climbed slowly and placed my foot center on each number, saying the number out loud like a child counting to sleep. At the top, my shin connected with an edge that wasn't there with a neat kiss of pain. Not a fall, not a scene. Just the diamond-sharp slice of hitting the wrong place in the right house. It was above the 12, exactly where you would not expect wood. I sat down stupidly on the top tread because I couldn't think of a better posture for disbelief. I texted the host because I wanted the excuse of information. Hi, totally fine here, just a weird question. The loft stairs feel like an extra step at night. Might be me being tired. Is the lighting the only option? The 3 dots did their dance and went away and came back. Hey, the stairs can feel steeper at night. Ship stairs are tricky, they wrote. There's a motion nightlight in the loft too. Please hold the rail, and definitely keep the styes. Are LEDs on? Some guests turn them off and then struggle. Let me know if you need anything. It was the answer you write when you've already written it before. The chalk numbers didn't move by themselves. That's not what I'm saying. But when I looked from the landing down, the 7 sat slightly farther back on its tread than I remembered writing it. I told myself perspective does that. Your head changes, and so does your story of distance. I put a strip of painter's tape across the front of the 12th tread and wrote 12 on the tape in block print, an anchor for my sore shin. When I took a photo from below, it looked right. When I went down and back up again, the tape was there, firm and unpeeled, and the extra step still happened between tape and landing, enough for my knee to feel the hesitation that becomes a bruise tomorrow. I tried measuring because proof is a lullaby, floor to loft lip. I stretched the tape on the diagonal and swore under my breath. The numbers felt like a dare. The treads were not evenly spaced. They weren't meant to be. They were honest to the cabin's bones and the person who built them with a square and a hope. The measurement didn't tell me anything except that the world behaves for you when you want it the least. I put my phone camera on record and pointed it up the stairs and then walked up and down twice, thinking later I'd scrub frame by frame and see my foot place itself on air and then not. The video shows a person climbing a set of 12 lit treads like a normal guest. Nothing extra except a sound you wouldn't notice unless you were listening for it. An extra creak that doesn't map to a visible piece of wood. I stopped after the 3rd run because I started to feel ridiculous, and also because my shin had found a pain with a personality. I turned the stairlights off to test, and immediately turned them back on because the dark between the treads was not friendly. The more I focused, the narrower the house felt. The triangle overhead pressed down a little. The fan's whoosh took on a tired tone. I made the couch my bed because the loft suddenly felt like the top bunk in a camper. Fun until the night has opinions. On the couch you sleep near the door, which feels like power. That's the math I do when the room makes itself taller without asking. In the morning the house flipped its coin and showed its friendly face. Light ran down the stairs in a stripe you could trust. My shin wore a new mark, thin and precise, a line you'd get from the corner of something more narrow than the treads I could see. The bruise didn't match the story. It sat half an inch above where the tape had been, and at an angle the stair noses didn't own. I guessed at the way bodies make their own maps of impact, decided I'd misremembered my footfall, and made coffee so strong the mug warmed my hands like a chore. The chalk numbers were ghosted. Not gone. The tape still read 12 in my own handwriting. I touched it and it felt secure. In the photo from last night, the edges curled a hair more, but that could have been a trick of light, LEDs making drama out of adhesive. When I counted up, casually, like I'd forgotten my own performance, I said 12 and reached the loft without thinking of 13. It made me feel mean for how big I'd let it grow in my head. The manual stared from the table with its well-meaning exclamation points. I wrote an email to my rational friend and didn't send it. I left the day to itself on purpose. I hiked. I read on the deck. I carried a sandwich around like a baby bird and dripped tomato on the rail and cleaned it like a person who wants to be invited back. By evening, the sky went the color of a bruise wrapping itself up. The LEDs under the stairs lit obediently when I flipped the switch and cast those small moons under each tread. The extra step was a thought I didn't want to have, which guaranteed it would be the only one. When I went up for a sweater, I made a decades. Easy on, an experiment, small and dumb. I stepped like the extra was there. I lifted my foot for a 13 and placed it nowhere and let my knee bend for no reason, so when the extra came, it would meet me with no argument. It didn't. The stairs accepted me in 12 neat compliance. The body wants patterns more than it wants truth. Coming down, I tried again, counting 13 so I wouldn't bang into the world's edges if the world decided to add one. My foot found wood where it should and nowhere it shouldn't until the last 2 steps, when my heel caught on air and I reached for the rail and caught it, and the staircase groaned in its own voice, a new note somewhere between 11 and 10. The bruises, brother, bloomed on my other shin the next morning like we'd made a deal in my sleep. I set flour on a plate and patted a little onto the 12th tread. Yes, I know, and put a matching dusting on the landing, thinking I'd see where my feet went if the night made me lie to myself again. I numbered the treads again, lighter this time, not wanting to scuff the wood the way chalk can. I told myself I was being ridiculous, and then added a piece of tape at knee level on the newel post at what looked like where my thigh had met its argument. The cabin hummed gently in its wood way, the kind of creak that's comfort if you're not forcing it to fight you. The video I took that night is useless. It's light and shadow and the stupid shape of my own legs. There's a part where the phone tries to focus on the tape and fails, pulsing in and out as if it's breathing. Between 2 frames, I can convince myself my foot is planted on something that isn't in the next frame. Another country uses that to prove ghosts. Where I'm from, it proves phone cameras aren't eyes. I slept on the couch again and woke to use the bathroom in the hours houses seem to keep for themselves. The LED line made. The stairs look like a thin bridge. I put my foot wrong because I was trying to put it right. There's a sound you make with your mouth when you catch your balance, like a laugh that forgot the joke. I made it twice. My hand missed the rail first and found it second. The stairs counted themselves, 1 creak for each footfall. 12 creaks and a bonus 1, small and ashamed like a dog's paw tapping the floor when you think it's asleep. I stood still until I could hear the insects outside again, and then I went back to the couch with a care I reserve for eggs. Checkout morning made me petty. I tore up the tape because I didn't want to leave evidence of my superstition. I wiped the chalk off with a damp cloth and rubbed a little oil into the boards to hide the ghost of my numbers. I wrote in the guest book, "Beautiful, watch the steps." Nothing more. On the porch, I took a photo of my shins because I wanted to look at them later and think of the cabin and not of my own clumsy fear. The bruises were not symmetrical. The marks were angled in a way that still doesn't square with the wood in my memory. I texted the host, the faintest poke. "Lovely place. 1 small note. The stairs feel off at night. Not sure if the LEDs throw depth weird." The reply came with a cheerfulness I envied. "Thanks so much. The stairs are steep for sure. Contractor measured twice. They're legal for a loft, but definitely ship style. We always suggest using the rail after dark. Might add a second handhold. Safe travels." If there was a wink in it, it was not the host's fault. The flour wiped away without trace. The tape left no residue. My body took the memory home and tucked it into my calf muscles. In my building's stairwell, back in the city, I hesitate 1 step shy of the landing now in a way that makes me look drunk if someone's behind me. 12 at noon and 13 at night isn't an equation I believe in, but my body has started paying interest on it. Some evenings, key in the lock, I lift my foot like there's one more thing to do before I can be done, and sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't, and the bruise the day leaves behind doesn't always match where I would have put it if anyone had asked me. The farmhouse sat back from the road the way old houses often do, as if it had watched traffic grow up and preferred not to acknowledge it. A shallow porch sagged in the middle, forgivingly, and the screen door's spring let it sing a single note on every open and close. It was early fall, the kind with damp mornings and an afternoon that warms just enough to make you forget your jacket until the sun slides off the hill. Apple smell was in the air in a way that wasn't romantic so much as agricultural, fermented, a little sweet at the back of the throat. You could hear the river if you decided to, and a late train down in the valley made a long, lonely vowel twice in the hour. Inside smelled like Murphy oil soap and something older in the floorboards. There was a braided rug, a heavy oak table with a burn mark like a constellation in one corner, a 2/2 window on the east wall with that wavy glass old panes have that make the world look tipsy if you look long enough. The sash cords clicked in their channels when a draft moved through, a wooden sound I hadn't heard since my grandmother's house. The host had left their usual laminated manual, Wi-Fi written on a post-it slapped over someone else's handwriting, confusing recycling instructions, a note in bold. Storm expected overnight. Please latch windows. East window sticks when swollen. Mason jar of matches by the stove. The forecast on my phone agreed in a blue band. Line of storms, 40 to 60 mph gusts, timing around 8. By the door, on a side table that had squared off edges as if someone had planed them to stop catching hips, sat a cloth-bound guestbook, cream linen cover, ribbon marker, a black rollerball pen laid across it with the kind of ceremony you give something you want people to notice. I opened it because I'm nosy and because guestbooks are small confessionals where strangers try to outdo each other with gratitude. The first page I landed on wasn't the last entry. The ribbon had marked a clean spread in the middle. The right-hand page bore a neat block of writing, 3 paragraphs underlined twice in places like a person who wants a point to stick. It took my brain a second to understand why I felt disoriented. The handwriting was mine. Not just mine generally, mine specifically, down to the lazy slant of my R, the way I overcross a T when I'm thinking, the small hook I add to 1 and the European 7 I picked up in college. My full name at the top, first and last, spelled with the exact half flourish I pretend isn't a flourish. The dates match the calendar I was living, October 12/15. Below the dates, Stormline ETA 8:32 p.m., gust front before, close the east window, please don't open it. That last line doubled with a second hand, darker, as if written exactly on top of itself after a hesitation. The F in front, crossed too long, like a finger run the wrong way through hair. I stood there with my hand on the back of the chair, not sitting and not walking away, and read it again, slower, looking for jokes. I have stayed in places where the hosts fill in fake entries to make the book feel alive for the first few guests, but they don't write warnings in their guests' handwriting. They don't write your name as if you'd tried out 3 different ways of forming the last letter and chose the one that makes you feel like a person who has a nice pen. The page before was blank. So, as the page after. I flipped toward the front. Entries were normal there. Families thanking the snow and the fireplace. A kid named Rowan's crayon drawing of a cow. A couple who proposed and wrote about the ring and a hiking trail and how they wanted to come back in spring. The writing in the middle did not belong to the tone of any of it. I told myself I was overtired, that the part of me that loves patterns was giving me the comfort of a known curve. The logical scaffold I built was ugly but stood. The host has my name from the reservation. The host has the dates. Anyone with a weather app can write down a number. The warning is practical for an old sash window that swells and complains. Maybe a guest once forced it and cracked a pane. The handwriting, though, that's where the explanation got thin and everyone can see the light through it. To prove myself wrong, I found a grocery pad on the kitchen counter and wrote my name twice. The R slouched just so. The loop on my Y forgot to fully loop. I pressed my finger on the page in the book and felt the slight burr of ink slightly raised where it had sat heavy on the paper. It wasn't a printed simulation, it was a pen. I texted the host partly because I wanted permission to ignore it. Hi, made it in. Gorgeous place. Quick thing, the guest book has an entry with my name and dates and a note about the storm. Is that something you do? I thought about adding a smiley face, decided not to, sent it anyway. The answer came 10 minutes later with the rhythm of someone keeping an eye on their phone while cooking. Hi, welcome. Yes, the book is a little quirky. We started doing gentle prompts so folks would leave useful notes. East window does swell, so best to keep latched if the barometer passes 29.5. We learned the hard way. No worries if it looks weird. Hope you have a cozy storm. The tone eased something in me. Hosts who use the word barometer feel like they've done this before, but the part of me that knows what my R looks like did not settle. I took the book to the table and set it under the lamp like I was going to write something and then didn't. A low groan moved through the house that might have been the refrigerator or the wind finding a new edge. The east window's sash cords clicked twice, once each, like someone had tapped the pulleys with the gentleness of a knuckle. I looked at the window because now there was a phrase attached to it in my head. Don't open, and a thing gets larger when you name it. The afternoon carried on. A hawk strobed across the east glass at head height and left me with a picture of white-tail bars I could have counted if I'd been someone else. The blue in the sky flattened to a kind of wadded tissue gray by 5. The neighbor's maple showed red down one side like a blush or a warning. I told myself it was the kind of day made for writing other people's names in guest books and meaning it, and then I set the book aside with its ribbon, put back in place the way good guests do, and went to make soup heavy with rosemary from a jar, because the fresh had blackened in the back of my crisper drawer 2 apartments ago. The house, if houses care, seemed to approve. It had that hush old structures get when you treat them like people. The storm found the house right on schedule, which is hard on stories because it makes you think you're the one being obedient. The first gust smacked the east side in a way you felt in the bones of the place, the kind of pressure change that makes your ears want to pop even though all you've done is stand in your own kitchen. The lights dimmed once, bravely, and rallied. Rain began as needles and became ropes. I could smell wet wood where the sash met the sill and the hint of something old in the rope channels like a damp attic. The stove clock blinked to 12 honk without shame, and then, obediently to me, I reset it to a time it didn't deserve. I don't know at what point the guest book became the center of the room. It was there under the lamp, a plain object with too much context. When the first thunder moved across the ridge like a bowling ball rolling the length of a church, I poured a drink I didn't need. The glass left a circle on the oak I wiped up immediately. Then, nervous that I cared about a rented table, I put down a napkin. When the next flash ripened and then cracked open a few counts later, the lights did that theater flicker. The room went dark long enough to feel. In the dark, the book wasn't blank anymore. It wasn't glowing, that's not what I mean. It was like the page learned a second way to be visible when the lamp went out. Lines rose in the low light, a trick of the retina, a function of texture, paper remembering pressure. I brought my face close and felt foolish, but the words were there. A second entry in slightly smaller letters under mine, same hand, a notebook version of my voice rather than my scheme. Windshift 849, don't unlatch, you will want air. The R slanted like mine. The 9 had its own little backward-leaning tail. I turned the lamp back on immediately like a child, and the second entry was gone, or rather wasn't visible in that light. I raked the lamp across the page at a sharp angle, and the strokes lifted faintly, indentations more than ink. Graphite will sometimes appear under raking light if another sheet had been written on top of it. This looked like the paper itself had accepted a rehearsal of strokes, and then kept them secret until darkness made the secret the only thing. I did what you'd do. I argued with science I only half understood. Someone wrote hard enough on a page above this one to leave the grooves. The grooves are mine because I wrote this later and then forgot. The storm is playing tricks with duration. I closed the book to another page and held it in dark on purpose. My eyes gave me ghosts of other people's gratitude, half hearts, the word cozy repeated by different hands in different years. But when I went back to the ribbon page and turned the lamp off again, the second entry had more lines. Coffee ring 907. Sorry. This in the exact apologetic loop of my S, like someone who knows me thought it funny to narrate my manners. I told myself I would not check the time. I checked the time. 9:02. I moved the glass to the other side of the table, then stupidly moved it back, because the napkin would be lonely. And what am I even keeping from whom? I held the book because holding a thing is how I know it's real. The spine creaked softly. Honest noise. Leather on paper. No performance. The east window banged its sash in a quick tantrum against the latch, and my body took a step toward it without permission. Air would have felt so good. The storm was humid the way summer's leftovers are, all weight and no generosity. The rope inside the jam ticked like a metronome hit with a fingernail. No, I said, out loud to a window. I stood with my hand not on the latch because that felt like a line I didn't want to cross without understanding why I'd be the one drawing it. In another flash and dark, the book told me what I'd chosen. Thank you. It was small, 2 words, in the same hurried thin strokes I use when I'm embarrassed. I forced the lamp on again, relief unspooling into annoyance. The page showed only the heavy original ink and the absence of ink where the ghost lived. I tried to catch it out. I took my phone and turned the flashlight on and off like an idiot conducting experiments in a room that deserved better. The dark made lines. The light erased them almost. The third time the room went black, the writing had gotten, I swear it, too specific. Remember basement latch? It slips. Don't go down. I hadn't opened the basement door. I hadn't even seen one. I stood there with the diet of thunder, rain, and stupid human breath and made a small circle in the house. The light on. The light off. The east window shivered under the pressure and thought better of its complaint, like a person who wanted to bring something up and stopped. I found the basement door, of course there was one, around the corner behind a hanging quilt. Old houses hang quilts in doorways the way people hang apologies. The latch had that farmhouse complication of a bent nail as supplementary locking mechanism, and a hook and eye that looked fine in a photo but gives no one any confidence in wind. I had no intention of going down, but my hand touched the hook and the hook jumped. Static makes that happen sometimes, or the storm wanting everything connected to everything else. Back at the table, the page had added yet another line in that thin, dark, friendly relief. "You're writing this." I closed the book and felt the stiff cover under my palm like a vow and told the house, "No, I'm not," which is, of course, a sentence you only say when you're not sure. At 9:07, because I am the kind of person who becomes petty in the face of being told what I will do, I set the glass in the sink. The oak still had the wet, darker circle where I'd wiped earlier imperfectly. The book didn't correct itself. It kept the future I had almost had. At 9:12, the power went for real and stayed gone long enough to turn the house into a single noise. Rain, hard, on a roof that had been assaulted for 100 years and still did its job, and the slow pull of drafts through every bad seam like the place was breathing. I lit one of the mason jar matches and realized how little a single flame does in a big room. It makes a rumor of light and then asks your eyes to do the rest. In the shadow of that rumor, the pages on either side of mine, the ones I had called blank, wore writing. Not in ink you could see in daytime, in the same recessed marks that had needed dark to tell the truth. I flipped back one page and ran my fingertips over it and felt the low ridges of a long paragraph that wasn't there before, a pressed speech in a hand that wasn't mine at all. Rounder, slower, the kind of writing someone taught you when you were 10 in a classroom with a poster that said practice makes, and never felt like it was going to end. I couldn't read it unless I let the room have me. When I did, I caught, in bits. We waited, and east, and don't, and a date from a spring I hadn't been here. On the next page, in pressure rather than ink, my own name again. A sentence starting, "You'll think." I stopped reading. There's a point where the thing you hold stops being evidence and becomes a conversation you didn't consent to. I put the book down gently, the way you set a sleeping baby in a crib, hands pausing a second after contact, as if the object can feel the difference between being placed and being dropped. The storm rounded the house again in a clomping heel toe and then ran off. I didn't open the east window. The rope inside the jamb went quiet. Morning made me feel slightly foolish the way morning does. Sun on the eastern glass took away the suspicion and left cold facts. Paint cracked in crocodile skin at the sash, a smear of salt left by last winter, a dead stink bug in the channel that had probably lived on this sill longer than my lease back home. The guest book looked like any polite guest book. My original entry, the one I didn't write, sat where I left it, ink proud, warning both practice. I call and trite when you hadn't stayed to fight the latch. The ghost lines were stubbornly ordinary in daylight, which is to say invisible. Raking light at breakfast, cheap sun through cheap wavy glass, showed indentations if I wanted to find them, but I couldn't make the new sentences reappear. That felt merciful and like being punished at the same time. I wrote to the host again. Storm was lively, but all good. Quick follow-up. The guest book seemed to have pressure marks, like someone had written on a page placed over mine. Didn't know if that was part of the prompts you mentioned. I thought that was awkward and sent it anyway. The reply came from a different energy. Midday, kid noise in the background maybe, emojis smudged into text. Oof, last night was a doozy. Glad all good. Read the book. Ha, it's honestly kind of a prop at this point. It's from an antique shop and has a mind of its own, JK. We sometimes pre-fill dates so folks remember to sign. Definitely keep the east window latched if it's really moving air. The sash cords are original. The JK was generous. The rest was an answer written for people who don't want one. I tried to prove the indentations with pencil because that's what you do in movies, shading lightly to make hidden letters pop out. It works if the pressure was there to begin with. It makes a smudge when it isn't. I made a smudge with the pencil and felt the stinging little shame of ruining a thing. I apologized out loud to a book. I blew the graphite off and watched it lift like smoke into a kitchen that only smelled of toast. I read the normal entries to recalibrate. We got engaged. Cozy. Saw a fox. My own name on my own page itched even though it was exactly where I'd seen it the night before. I put my hand over it and felt my pulse come up in my palm. I kept the day out of the house as long as I could, on purpose. Walked down to the river on a path that smelled like every childhood fall combined, a compost of leaves and breath. Bought a muffin I didn't want from a woman who looked like she could have been my second-grade teacher and had the same careful way with the change. By dusk, the weather had washed the place clean, the ridge sharp in that amazing post-storm clarity where things look like sets painted too precisely. I played it being normal, cooked, read, stacked the matches back into their jar like teeth in a mouth. When my hand passed over the book to move it a few inches and wipe under it, the cover felt warm. It wasn't. It just felt that way because I'd made an enemy I didn't want to have. I didn't read it that second night. That's the truth. I left the lamp on and let my eyes go somewhere else. The east window breathed a little. There's a way old windows breathe, and then went still. I slept the kind of sleep that is 70% bargaining and 30% unconsciousness. Somewhere in there, I dreamed about the noise sash chords make, a soft tap, only the taps lined up with syllables, and in the dream I could understand the words but woke knowing nothing. Checkout morning was laundry and dishes and a sense of doing right by a place. I lingered on the porch and pressed my palm to the stiff mesh of the screen because I like the way it vibrates under touch. I decided not to sign the guest book. It felt like cooperating. It felt like tempting. At the last minute, because I also hate being impolite, I opened it to a page near the back and wrote in block capitals, unlike my usual hand, "Thank you for the stay," hoping a new posture could keep me from becoming my own evidence. The R still slanted. It always does. Underneath, though I hadn't intended it, my hand added, "Don't open the east window," with the ease of muscle memory. It looked like the first entry. I chewed my lip until I tasted iron, crossed it out, then, embarrassed, drew a little heart to make the cross out friendly. I closed the book like a lid and put the pen on top like I was tucking someone in. On the drive back, I told myself all the generous explanations. The housekeeper pre-filled my name because they saw it on the reservation. The dates were copied from my check-in message. People warn other people about the east window. I recognized kinship and made it mine. Graphite press-through is a thing. The storm made me sensitive to drafts. The power failure made drama out of paper. The timing was coincidence dressed as intimacy. I wanted to believe, so I did. I wanted not to, so I didn't. Back home, a week later, I was making a list in a cheap spiral notebook. Groceries, work errands, call my brother, a note to replace the battery and the smoke alarm I'd ignored through 2 midnight chirps, and my eye caught the shape of my own R and felt wrong. Not for how it looked, for how practiced it was. I turned the page and saw through the paper the shadow of something like, not letters exactly, but the shape of writing where nothing was written yet. I turned the light off to go to bed, and in that one beat before my apartment's shape belonged to the dark, the ghost lines looked like a sentence I had read before. "You'll think," is what my brain filled in, even though my eyes had no business knowing that. I am not saying a book wrote me. I am saying I have a page in my head now that holds space, and when the room goes dark, it's easier to read that page than to believe the next minute isn't already outlined in a hand I recognize as my own. I didn't open the east window. I won't tell you it would have mattered if I did. I will tell you that when I set a glass down now, anywhere, I look for the circle it leaves and whether the book is on the vase. E-table or not, I say sorry out loud like a person writing an apology ahead of time so I can recognize it when I meet it again. I told myself I booked the apartment for the walkability and the light. If I'm honest, I wanted to try on the kind of life that says, "Hey Google," and gets an answer. The listing was glossy and sleepless. Nest thermostat, smart shades, smart lights, noise monitor to protect neighbor quiet hours, and a host named Inez who replied to my questions before I finished having them. The photos had that Scandinavian in Lisbon look, pale wood, a black steel rail on the tiny balcony, a ficus so healthy it read as an exaggeration. The location pin fell somewhere between Moraria and Alfama, where the streets are a bowl of stone and gulls fling their arguments down the alleys at all hours. You could see the Tagus from the balcony if you leaned and believed. The code for the main door came on WhatsApp with confetti emojis and a note about the calzada, the mosaic cobbles that are Lisbon's beautiful hazard. The stones can be slippery if it rains. Please take care. The building smelled like stone dust and detergent. The elevator was the size of an apology and stuttered between floors with a softness I let myself call charm. In the flat, a Google Nest Hub Max sat on the kitchen counter like a friendly eye. The manual, laminated of course, told me to say, "Okay, Google, bom dia," to open the shades, which I did, and the black fabric rolled up obediently, letting the pastel buildings across the street lean into my morning with their laundry and satellite dishes and a quiet cat on a sill doing that heavy-lidded cat look that passes for greeting. There were little confirmations everywhere that I was in a system designed to flatter me into feeling competent. The thermostat glowed 21 degrees Celsius when I waved a hand near it, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. The hue lights were grouped into scenes: sunset, fado, focus. The Sonos in the corner had a cue labeled Saudade, light, that felt like a joke about the city and itself. The manual pointed to a small white puck on the hallway ceiling. Minute, a noise and environment monitor, positioned as a good neighbor gatekeeper. Detects decibel level, temperature, and motion, not sound content. No cameras in the apartment. We respect your privacy. External camera only at the building entrance. Shared. The sentence soothed in that legal way, precise enough to claim the shape of decency, vague enough to leave all the room in the world. Ines messaged as I rolled my suitcase into the bedroom. Welcome. Everything okay? Try the coffee on Rua dos Zapateros if you like a proper bica. And a tiny favor? Please do not leave the balcony door open after 10 p.m. Gulls are aggressive if they smell food. It was 3:14 in the afternoon. Her online dot beside her name never wavered. I sent back a thumbs up and a thank you. She replied with a smile that arrived like a nod from an adjacent room. I went to find a late lunch and let the city print itself on my feet. Tram bells, tourists chasing pastéis de nata like absolution, a man on a stoop playing a 12-string like it was more than wood. Lisbon's hills reminded my lungs they are not as young as they pretend. By dusk, I had a bag of produce and a bottle of Vinho Verde sweating in my hand, my phone giving me that smug 12,482 steps notification like a treat. Back in the flat, the shades came down in a glide. The Nest Hub Max, unbidden, offered the weather in a neutral voice. Tomorrow, highs of 22, light wind from the north. I said, okay, Google, boa noite, and the light softened to a level called candle, which was an oversell but kindly meant. I thought, because I wanted to, the smartness was infrastructure, a set of conveniences that would let my mind unclench. I liked the way the thermostat's presence sensor woke with a soft white pulse when I walked past, like a cat raising its head at known footsteps. I liked the routine Inez had set, where the shades would half open at 7:30 to forgive you for sleeping in. The minute's white puck did nothing dramatic. I lifted the manual again to remind myself a noise monitor with motion detection could exist without recording me. The words, no cameras inside, gave me a reference to point my comfort toward. I set my phone to Lisbon time, laid down on the sofa, eyes on the ceiling's plaster medallion that had survived 6 renovations and a century. Outside, the gulls ripped one last argument. A scooter skated the alley. The apartment adjusted itself on its little cues, shades sighing down the last centimeter, a light near the desk extinguishing as a scene timer finished its thought. The room smelled like new wood and just a trace of someone else's cleaner. When Inez sent a final boa noite, rest well, the message pinged at the same second my eyes closed, which is either evidence of a kind of care or of a habit that can pass for one. I wanted to believe in useful habits. I let them hold me. Jet lag is a coin toss. That first night the coin landed on vigilance. My sleep skated under the surface of hearing. Scooter brakes squeal on stone, shoes on stairs, somebody's key scraping one extra time around their cylinder. I set the phone on the nightstand face down to discourage myself from doom-scrolling the hours until the sun. At some point, my body gave me an exit from wakefulness with the promise of a quick return. That's what it feels like, a bargain. I took it. When I woke, it was because the room had rearranged itself a millimeter. Small things announced themselves to a B. Odie, even when the mind pretends not to know their language. The only light was a pale stripe under the bedroom door. From the Nest Hub's idle screen in the kitchen, I realized later, showing a squid of a clock. I reached for my phone and the screen lit to the lock screen. 2 notifications sat with the patience of things that think they're helpful. Nest. Motion detected in living room. 2:41 a.m. Tap to view clip. Minute. Movement detected. 02:41. The double time did something to my stomach I would rather not write down. I don't subscribe to angels' numbers, but there are hours that sound like doorbells. I touched the Nest alert because when a piece of software asks to be believed, the courtesy is to see what it thinks it saw. The link opened a web page. No login prompt, just a gray player window with a slivered thumbnail, a pale shape crossing a darker room. The clip buffered and then played. 8 seconds. In the camera's field, where my living room existed at night, age-aware. Shades down, a thin seam of light at the edges where the street lamp sneaked in, the ficus leaf holding its glossy question mark. My couch, my sweater draped where I'd left it. Rabid proof that this was last night, not an archive. From the left frame edge, a figure crossed the room toward the kitchen. Hoodie up, bare feet. The gate was mine in a way you don't recognize until you see yourself on security footage. A small hitch from an old ankle. A head tilt like listening to a voice from another room. The person passed in front of the Nest Hub Max and turned their face slightly toward it, not enough to surrender to the camera, enough to flash me my own mouth in concentration. In the clip, the person, me, didn't turn on a light. The only glow was the Nest's screen and the idiot eye of the microwave's clock, blinking 12 o'clock because I hadn't set it. I was in bed. I was in bed. That's the sentence. I stared at the clip until the looping made the movement feel unrelated to meaning. I wrote it off and then back on in the seconds between pulses of adrenaline. People sleepwalk. People sit up, walk, drink water, forget. I touched my throat and winced at the tenderness where I must have swallowed hard. The minute notification had less romance. A little graph line, a peak, movement detected at 0241, a green badge, its UI confident and dull. Under the clip, a fact I pretended not to absorb. Familiar face detected, unknown. Inez's Nest was smarter than me about what my face wasn't and had the decency not to call me familiar. I texted Inez because it was easier than not. Oi, sorry for the hour. My phone got a Nest motion alert for the living room at 2:41. Is there an interior cam? The listing said no. I sat staring at the bubbles that didn't come, thumb hovering over the next message I didn't want to send. Before I could decide a better phrasing, a message arrived. Hola, so sorry for ping. I set alerts for building entrance only. No interior camera inside the apartment, I promise. There is minute, noise sensor in the hall. It uses motion for home away. It can sometimes trigger with AC. Are you okay? Before I finished reading, my phone showed a second gray notification from Nest. Clip shared automatically, living room 024106024114. As if to underline the point, Google Home spoke from the kitchen in its weeds-neutral voice. The front door is locked. I hadn't asked it. I hadn't moved. I lay there with my muscles acting like strangers and listened to a device reassure me with a sentence meant for another category of worry. I got up because sitting in a bed at 2:44 is the posture of a victim in a story I don't want to be in. The parquet was chill. In the living room, nothing was wrong except the feeling that I had walked through it recently in a version of myself with fewer qualms. I looked for a camera because that felt like a thing you can do with your hands that has an outcome. I peered at the smoke detector. Dumb, I know. I stood on a chair, put my face near the minute puck like an idiot inspecting a planet, read its little back label with its reassuring no camera icon. I mashed its settings in the Nest Hub until it showed me a menu with the camera off and a physical shutter snap down, red dot glowing to indicate privacy mode. I believed it as far as you can believe a red dot. Inez wrote again, too fast to be asleep. Just checked logs for the building entrance camera, no activity at that time. Perhaps your phone barrier sensor? Sometimes phones flag motion if a notification banner rolls. If you like, I can disable exterior alerts while you're in. I crafted, sure thanks, because what else was there, and did not admit that either my phone knows my face less than her devices do, or it knows it too well. Back in bed, my eyes refused to close all the way. When they did, the room in the clip played behind them. Not scary, just too factual, a simple parade of my objects under the gaze of a lens I couldn't place in space. I slept again the way you fall through an unmarked door. When the birds started that thin riot right before the sky commits to morning, I woke and spent an honest minute confused about whether I had been in the living room in the night. I had no glass by the sink. The tap was dry. The ache in my ankle was from hills, not floors. Still, the clip lived in my phone, and 8 seconds is plenty of evidence when the only thing you need to prove is that your body behaves like a stranger at a precise and unkind hour. Day makes liars of nights. It always has. Over coffee, too strong because I fumbled the ratio and couldn't bring myself to care, I played the clip twice and then put the phone face down like it was an act of will. There is a hierarchy of explanations we offer ourselves, and I went down the list out loud like a rehearsal. Time zones. Maybe the alert shows my local at 2:41, but it's a 1:41 event or a 3:41 event and someone fat-fingered a setting. The clip's metadata scraped my hope clean. Europe, Lisbon, 02:41. Sleepwalking. I've never to my knowledge done it. First times happen for everything. Travel tilts bodies into obedience to other clocks. Exterior cam glitch. Reflection through the glass capturing me as a moving shadow. The angle in the clip was from countertop height facing the room. Through glass you get glare and ghostings. This showed my couch, my tangle of charger cords, the nest of keys and coins I'd emptied from my pockets. Through glass cameras don't see that. I typed an email to myself with those bullet points as if by giving them grammar I could make them kill the animal in my chest. I didn't send it anywhere. Ines messaged at 11 with a touristic kindness. If you walk to Miraduro da Senora do Monte, best light now before crowds. There's a kiosk with lemonade. And please note, minute flagged movement again at 0810. I think it's misreading shadows. Shall I turn off? The specificity of 0810 put the lemon into my lemonade. I answered, Sim, por favor, because speaking her language felt like a polite spell. The day burned the edges off the memory enough that I didn't leave for a hotel. That's a choice. I went up to the Miradoro, obedient, and let myself be a little person in a big vista. A guy proposed to his girlfriend and then looked around, panicked, for someone to photograph them holding the ring. A woman with an ear cuff handed him her phone like a sacrament. I clapped and then felt silly for participating in strangers. When I came back down, my calves drew tight like strings adjusting to humidity. I took a nap I was proud of for its unthinking. The second night, I thought I'd anchor the room to a single truth. I turned the Nest Hub's camera off, twice, checked the shutter, stuck a Post-it over it anyway, an affront the device would never feel. I unplugged the Sonos because it had a small red eye I was tired of seeing. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb and put its screen down in the drawer because I was as interested in not being told what I was doing at 2:41 as I was in not doing it. At 2:41, my phone vibrated through the drawer anyway. I can call it phantom vibration if you want. My body answers to none of your names for it. The room felt held. The apartment exhaled exactly the way a place does when no one is standing up. I did not stand up. I did not move. I lay there and tried to unclench the particular set of muscles around my eyes. Minutes passed without event. Only there was an email waiting under the lock screen in the morning. Nest, motion detected in living room, 2:41 a.m. The clip, another 8 seconds, showed my living room's negative space again. No figure this time. The field of the camera was slightly different, as if the device had settled into a new angle in the night. A soft swaying shadow